This is how we get our morning started with NetworkChuck.
Hey, Chuck, before we start the interview, you have set up this interview with Bart. So can you give us a bit of information about, who's Bart, how did you get to know him, and kind of what the interview is going to be about before we jump into it?
Yeah, sure. So Bart, he's an interesting dude. He's actually a fellow CBT Nuggets trainer. And the reason I asked him on is because he knows a ton about AWS. And I know everyone's like, oh, AWS this, AWS that. I think he has almost every certification that AWS offers. So he just comes to the table with a breadth of knowledge. So I can't wait to hear what he has to say. And he's going to, I'm hoping, give us all the insights of how to get started and what the outlook is and how it relates to us as, network engineers. Could be pretty cool.
Brilliant. I'm looking forward to it, Chuck. Thanks so much for setting this up.
Absolutely. Let's break into it. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to This is IT. This is episode 3, and we've got someone who knows pretty much everything about AWS on the show today. His name is Bart Castle, and he has to be one of the most interesting guys I've ever met. So, Bart, tell me about yourself.
Hey, Chuck. Hey, David. Thanks for letting me on the show this morning. I appreciate you guys having me out. I guess the long story, to make it short, is that I use IT as a tool, and I got into it a bunch of years ago as a way to kind of propel my other endeavors. So I'm like an artist and a musician and just passionate about the outdoors and all those things, and IT gave me all those tools to make that stuff happen. So that was the big piece for me. I did spend some time in school. I spent a lot of time going through certifications and kind of digging farther along. But other than that, now I'm making these training videos, and it's kind of brought an entirely new kind of arena into the whole teaching world. I was a live in-class trainer for 5 years for Global Knowledge. I had a great time just kind of getting out there and doing this, talking to people, nerding out about IT stuff. I started big core networking classes too. It was with Avaya and Nortel, voice over IP and data networking. So we're right there with the Cisco team, duking it out.
So a lot of love between you and Chuck then.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I started out as a CCIE or as a Cisco voice professional.
Whoa! He started out as a CCIE. I like that.
No, I started out as a Cisco voice professional, and this was before they had any of the special CCNA VoIP tracks or anything like that. This was like Call Mangler 4, I think, was when I originally got started on it. And after that, moved into supporting other phone systems, and I got a gig on Avaya, and then I started learning about the Nortel gear and kind of some of the background behind those companies and how they were a little different than Cisco. And nowadays, they're all really similar, but back then, man, those switches, very different. ASIC versus CPU stuff, it was a battleground.
That's insane. So, okay, I won't hold the Avaya thing against you because that's a
call centers. Thing, it was all about the call centers.
Hey, UCCX, UCCE. I don't even want to hear anything. Anyways, so you are a CBT Nuggets trainer. We're fellow trainers at CBT, and you produce some amazing AWS content. So I just have to put that out there. It's amazing. But before we get into that, I do want to point out the interesting parts about you. So I think the best way to sum that up, and I actually found this video real quick. I think you actually posted it, so it's your fault. But let me see. That's your LinkedIn. This is Bart's LinkedIn if you guys want to check that out. However, that's not what I want to see. I want to see this video here.
Oh, is it the one with the starting the fire?
No.
There you go, dude. Wow, look at that long hair. That is hilarious. This is cracking me up, man. So that's an open mic. I used to run an open mic out in Oregon for years, and I filmed almost every week that we would do it. I'd film people, and we'd put them on YouTube. So that was, I don't know, 2005, 2008, something like that. It was a long time ago.
So you play the guitar, right? And you play, what else do you play?
I play guitar, I play flute, and pretty much any of the regular like band string instruments like bass guitar and 12 string. But I also play, little percussion instruments. I got some didgeridoo stuff I get into. And the big thing for me is I play flute, which is probably the most difficult instrument to make cool in a band. So that's kind of something that I've been doing for a while, is trying to make the concert flute cool. in rock bands and in, folk bands and things like that.
And you also you call yourself a yurt dweller, and I'm going to be honest with you. I had never known what a yurt was until I met you, and I had to look it up. What is a yurt?
So, yurts are one of the oldest forms of like what you might consider architectural housing that people ever really had. You know, kind of second after the cave and the teepee. But essentially, there's three things. You got wooden frame, and the whole idea was that the Mongols could move them, so they could break the walls down like an accordion, collapse the walls down, and then the roofs were just sticks. They'd bundle up the sticks, take the canvas off, roll it all together, strap it on a camel or a horse, and away you go. So fast forward, I don't have a camel or a horse, but I do have the wooden frame yurt. And the cool thing about them is that they're super affordable. So my wife and I wanted to figure out how we could live cheaply. And we bought that thing for a few $1,000s completely outright. And then we bought some property and we just lived there free for like several years and kind of rebuilt ourselves financially. It was an experiment. That was the whole goal. See how little you could do with and still be an IT instructor.
That's amazing, because like I don't own a house, and my wife and I we're about to have our fourth kid, so we got to make a decision here soon. Do we buy a house or not?
A yurt. There you go, Chuck. Buy one of those.
I'll just have a little yurt village.
Dude, you could be it's the Keith commune there. It'll be all set.
Hey, I'm game.
So Bart, I don't know you very well, but tell me about the hat, because whenever I see you on a video or something, you're wearing a hat. Is that because you like hunting for dinosaurs, or what's the story?
I guess there's probably two parts to that. I enjoy a good spectacle, and I think that people in general find it's interesting, and they're drawn to stuff. You know, I've never been one to want to blend into the room, so I usually try to go the opposite direction, just to bring excitement in. And I found too that being in class, that little gimmicky stuff breaks down walls. It gets people engaged. They're smiling, they're laughing. So it was a real quick way. Even if I took the hat off once class started, I would still wear it into the room and make a crocodile hunter joke here or there, or, you know, and people they respond to that stuff. And if you've done enough content material, you know that those little things it's gold. So I use that now in my nuggets because it's a quick recognizable thing that people can catch on with. And it's interesting. People look at it and it adds a little bit of element there. And in the yurt, there's a giant dome above me with light coming in. So the hat actually cuts down on the top glare a little bit, which is good.
You were telling me you're also into dinosaurs, is that right? So, I mean, it was interesting when you introduced yourself. You said that you use IT as a mechanism to do other things. So, It sounds like you've got a lot of passions. Yeah,
so I don't get bored. You know, somebody asked me the other day, like, what is it that you do or don't do? And I was like, there's one thing I don't do is get bored. I've got a lot going on. But when it comes to dinosaurs, the thing about them is that they're gone, right?
Yeah.
And there is...
We think so, unless you know otherwise.
Cool. Well, and we can get into the birds and things later on, but the big thing for me is that people look at dinosaurs, and it's a perfect example of what science does really well and what science does really poorly. Because what science does is interpret findings, right? And so if these findings change, then the reports change. And so one minute you have this creature who you thought was cold-blooded and lumbered along, and then a few years, 20 years, 30 years later, somebody finds something else and the facts change. And so I think it's just intriguing how malleable facts become in science in some of this.
It's interesting.
And I should be careful the way I say that because we're living in this fake news world. I'm just pointing out dinosaurs are a great example of that. It's the danger of believing too far or going too far or always remembering that this is a result of the findings that we currently have right now. So those are important things. And beyond that, they're awesome. They have these teeth and these claws and these skeletons.
You got to show the tooth
awesome.
Because you showed us before we started. You got to show the tooth.
Yeah. Show us
so
the tooth.
I'm wearing this little raptor claw, and you guys can probably see it on the other.
Claw. Sorry, go on.
It's a claw, and people ask me about it all the time. It's not a bear claw. It comes from one of the smaller velociraptor-style dinosaurs. And you know the raptors in Jurassic Park, they're not very accurate. They're like 4 times too big. So picture a much smaller dinosaur than those ones. Those guys were kind of more like a Utah raptor style size, and these ones are smaller. So that's the claw I have. And I'm also wearing my big T-Rex shirt today. So I got my dinosaur skull, all that stuff going. And my last piece here, I got a little Stegosaurus on my hat. He's my little dude that hangs on there.
Yeah.
Bart, have you ever seen the movie Jurassic Park? You might like
I'm
that.
fond of this movie, yes.
Also,
very
we'll,
fond of
we'll,
the
have, we'll have to
reboot.
talk offline because my daughter is really excited about dinosaurs, and we want to come to the US and visit Utah and go and see what we can find. So offline, I'll pick your brain.
Sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. The other thing with the hat, the last thing, is I live in the South. And so when you're down here and you wear the hat, you get this weird sort of strange pull in different directions. People will be like, I know this dude. And other people will be like, what's up with that dude? But they always come to some sort of conclusion. And I love that about it. I think it's hilarious. It wins me clout where it really isn't deserved. And it earns me like aplomb, in other situations, which maybe probably is deserved. So that's the hat.
So, I mean, Chuck, you could ask a question, but what I was going to ask you, we can take this offline and cut this out. But I was going to ask you how you got into IT, because it sounds like you had a really interesting background. So do you want to ask that, Chuck, or did you want to say something else?
Yeah, hey Bart, how'd you get into IT?
Well, funny question.
I think mine was a lot better than that. You got to do a better job than that, Chuck.
Bart, no, go ahead, Bart.
Oh, man. So let's see. I started out working for my dad as a construction worker. He's a contractor and a general contractor and builds homes and, solves problems with like wood and nails and metal. And I always thought that was really cool. And he used tools. I love tools from the beginning. So as I got older, and honestly got into video gaming and computer gaming, a friend of mine showed me how to build a computer from scratch. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. I've seen cars go together. I've seen houses go together. These computers are pretty interesting. And from there, it just kind of spiraled into, this is interesting. And then I found out that people would pay you to work on them. And
That's always a bonus.
yeah, and then also that you don't necessarily need to have a computer sciences degree to be able to create a career around it. So I was really opposed to massive student debt. And we've been very fortunate. I was able to get out of it pretty clear. My wife's got a ton of debt.
Now, when did you figure that out? Because I mean, even when I was in school, I didn't even know this was a path. I didn't know you could just skip school and do this. I had no idea.
Well, I didn't skip school completely, but instead of going for a 2-year program, so I got back after vagabonding for a while, and I was like, I got renewed purpose. It's fun to live in the van, but I think I need some money to make things work on the side. So I came home and I lived with my parents. The plan was, I'm going to do it. I'll just go home and I'll live at home for a year or 2 tops so I can get some schooling in. And then I went to a technical program, which was like an accelerated 18-month sort of thing. And it was network technology. And it was at a business college. And their whole goal was, number one, you get the degree, but they also get you certified and they do job placement. So that was kind of the whole thing for me, was it was a real all-inclusive package where I knew that I was going to end up with something at the end of it. So I went through it and got even more into it and realized that it wasn't as difficult as I thought it might have been to get a degree and to get certified. I was an MCP right out of school there. Went on to get my MCSA as well. So those things all just clicked together because of those programs, and it was small, it was accelerated, and I was able to work while I was at school. So those were all things that I tried to do, but I never really went to university. I never had a off to college experience. So for all the value I got out of it, I didn't get to do some of those things, but I think in the end it worked out pretty well for me. And then once you're in it, I just kept working up through it. I started out as a desktop technician at Lithia Motors out there in Oregon. And I think, Chuck, you probably have Lithia there in Texas. I know we had them in Corpus Christi and Abilene and a couple other locations, but they're a big car dealership. And I was a help desk technician. And here's my story for you, Chuck, because I think you'll like this one. I remember closing help desk tickets to reset passwords and hearing people talk about how we were going to get a voice over IP phone system soon. And there was like mutterings, and people were nervous about it. And then the Cisco techs walk in and they've got their polos on and they're looking hip. And the dude is talking about,
they had long beards.
He did. He had this beard. And he was like going off about call processing orders and spinning calls out this way and THO and all this fun call avoidance, cost avoidance. And I was like, what is all this madness? And I just thought these guys were the coolest dudes I'd ever seen in the network world. So I was instantly like, I'm going to spend every minute in the office and go over there.
Hold on. Let's sit on that for a second. Yes, the voice guys are the coolest guys in the industry. Don't anyone forget that.
Sorry, Chuck, I can just say I was also a call guy from version 3.0 of Call Manager, but things have moved on, Chuck.
Hey, I'm still rocking Call Manager 12, the newest stuff. It's awesome.
Programmability, you've heard of that, Chuck? Come on. Sorry, I just had to interject that there. Sorry,
get
go
outta
on,
here.
Bart.
Oh, I love it, man. And Chuck, when I was watching your bridge video that you did for CBT Nuggets, the part where you're talking about being an ICE engineer, an integration communications, what's the expert at the end there? Engineer? I think it's engineer. When you were talking about being an ICE guy, going into stores and scoping out their phone systems, that is exactly me, man. Whenever I go to dealerships or like whatever, a video store, a grocery store, I'm like peeking at their phones. It's like, oh, you got those ShoreTels there. How's that working out? That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Whenever I see a Nortel or a ShoreTel, I'm like, oh, you guys, I'm never working for your IT department. You don't care about budgets or anything.
But in most of those scenarios, those guys are like, the ISP pays for it. It's phone system as a service. And I'm like, all right, well, at least kudos for that. Because you guys, it's turnkey. They don't think about it at all. So I guess that's at least okay for them. But in the end, I love those engineers, man. And after that, I was like, I'm going to follow these guys around the office until I get their job. And after 2 years, they left the big deployment. And I was the IP telephony admin at Lithium Motors after that. The first time they ever had that position, they opened it up to me, and I got to have that job for a couple of years and did all of their TDM migrations over to the big call manager system. So killing off those PSTN connections and putting everybody over onto the main. We had all sorts of stuff. I guess it was MPLS, and a couple of other people had some weird stuff out on the edges. But just doing that, making that copper go away and turning it into this other copper over here instead. So that was it. And I just loved it. I love making the phones ring, the logic behind it, call presentation. I loved all of it. I thought it was super cool. And I still get super excited about making the phones ring. I just loved making that stuff work, just connecting the dots.
Oh, you're speaking my love language. I know what you mean. But I think it's interesting, though, that you make the stance that you got really excited about something new your company was implementing, and then you went forward and you just kind of spearheaded it. You jumped in, you made sure you were the guy, and then when the specialty guys left, you were it. And I mean, I've done that before. I've done that when people came in and like implemented something new and big. I made sure I learned as much as I could, and then when they left, I was the only guy who knew how to use it. So that's a genius tactic. But I think it's going to be more interesting now because you are not just a voice guy, but you're a cloud expert, and that's the new frontier. So I guess that was the next phase of what you're about to talk about. So go ahead.
Sure. So I left Lithia, stopped doing the phone system support stuff for them, and went up to a software development company in Portland who wrote IVR applications. So this is a whole other way of interacting with phone systems. Now we're taking calls coming in, we're queuing people up, we're offering them callbacks, we're doing all sorts of fun, really fancy stuff, and we're dipping into like back-end business systems, checking phone records, doing auto pay systems. Really cool stuff that you could do with the phone system. And the cool part was that at that company, I was a network admin. So I was supporting our phone systems, but I was also supporting all of our development lab. So we had all sorts of different vintages of Avaya phone systems. We had Cisco PBXs in there. We had Asterisk systems in there too. And anyways, these guys had a lot of problems. They were developers that would burn and destroy servers. So I spent a lot of time imaging disks and then moved them into the VM world. And they were like, holy cow, virtual machines are amazing. And then after that, we, a couple of months later, this is a couple of years later, AWS finally opened their Portland data center. And that was like 20 miles from our office. So we were able to like roll in there with, sub 10 millisecond round trip times from our office and back and just start expanding our lab into AWS. So that's where I kind of got started with Amazon Web Services. A buddy at work tapped me on my shoulder back in 2006 or 7 and was like, dude, have you seen this thing? Amazon just has these services available and you can sign up and start playing with these servers. Anytime, they have free ones available too. And this was back when Amazon only had like 3 products. They had like the queuing service and they had EC2. That was about it. So we started playing with it and we loved it. Our brains just exploded, because it was so easy, and we were struggling with like VMware and buying hosts and upgrading the network, and we just built a SAN from scratch and all this other stuff because we were on a budget and we could do it. So the whole thing fell together. I fell in love with Linux, fell in love with the cloud computing model. And here's the thing, Chuck. People talk about the cloud all the time, man. They talk about the newness of it, the terrifying, overwhelming cloud like moving towards them. And It's none of those things, man. It's like a revisitation of all of the classic stories. You have application design, you have throughput concerns, you have quality concerns, and it's all there. And cloud just gives us a fancy way of moving it to other people's data centers and changing the ownership models. So I got into it because I thought it was really cool and new, and then I realized that it's just a better version of all the things that we were doing before with better ownership points and better price points. So it sells itself. And this is a thing that I always think is funny about the cloud pitch. People talk about selling it to people. If you're paying attention at all, you're bought in already. And I think that is the saddest thing behind it, is we see so many people that they're not bought into it because they don't get it, or they just don't want to look at the improvements that it makes possible. I don't know what the problem is. There's a disconnect somewhere.
I mean, you're crazy passionate about it, and I just started getting into Azure. So I mean, I'll be honest. I was one of those guys you're talking about who did not want to go to the cloud because I love managing. I love hardware. I love pressing buttons. I love racking and stacking. I love managing my own stuff. And for me, it was kind of scary to think about putting any of my infrastructure, when I say mine, I mean my company's, in the cloud, because I felt like it was going to replace me somehow. I'd be out of a job somehow because part of what I was doing or what made me valuable would go away. So how would you speak to that?
Yeah, and I agree, Chuck. I think that you brought up a good point. So the first thing is that people are like definitely afraid of this, Chuck. This is a real concern. You have people who are sitting in positions they've carried for 15 years, 20 years, and have somehow managed to do that miraculously, probably because of Oracle. And then beyond that, they're able to just kind of keep moving with total atrophy. They're sitting still within an industry that moves all around them. So I think there's definitely a valid concern there, but the real problem is it's efficient. So if you want to be afraid of the change, that's fine. But the efficiency is not something you can ignore, because in the end, that efficiency is really the bigger threat. It's not Amazon offering the products. It's that businesses need to be able to do this more efficiently. So it's not a strike against you or against me or the way we did it 10 years ago. It's just better and more efficient for us to choose when to use it. And that's the last part, Chuck. I am not a 100% cloud fan at all. There are absolutely situations you should buy servers, run them in your data centers, and maintain physical assets. I'll tell you right off the bat. So anybody that tells you 100% cloud 100% of the time, they're fooling you. Okay, they're missing the point behind it. It was never go to the salad bar and eat all of the things. It was go to the salad bar and pick your things that fit your design, what you need, what you desire, and then choose those things. That's the big sales pitch behind it. So I'm with you, Chuck, and I don't tell people to get rid of their networks. I don't tell people to turn off all their systems. I tell them to use good judgment and solid business practices to decide when they should move something to a serverless model or move to a hosted model. And the last thing too, Chuck, is to keep in mind that cloud stuff, it's only a few steps above what we used to call co-location or hosted services. So
True.
I think if the other part is if you pitch it right to the businesses and talk about it in the right ways, it takes on a whole different aspect, which is kind of the last thing. And towards the end of my career here, as I've been more and more into teaching really the high-level super expert classes at AWS, I find the same theme. It's not the technical people that need this training as much as it is the business that needs the training. We need to get the business to appreciate how these business models can work and affect them, and most importantly, help them solve problems. Because right now, they've got the problems, and they're not necessarily solving them. So we really want to make sure that they're thinking targeted, specific ways to improve what they're doing rather than just replacing everything. Because there's a lot of people out there that'll tell them, just dump it, move it to the cloud. And what do you do about that? I heard a good quote the other day about legacy. Somebody said that legacy is really just a fancy way of saying it's something that is too good the way it originally was, and we haven't been able to find a better version of it. It's like, dude, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And unfortunately, we feel a lot of that right now, which kind of brings me back to Amazon Web Services. Their portfolio, compared to what the other vendors are offering, it might seem a little too omnipresent. Like, we want to be everywhere all the time. But the truth is that Amazon has customers that push them into these niches everywhere that they want to go because they found some customer with a problem and they wanted to help them solve it. So that is what I love the most about AWS's model. It's just all driven by feedback loop. So I think it ends up pushing their product line so much farther forward because it's driven by the customers who are asking them what to do next. So I think those are pretty fun features. And in the end, you look at their catalog, and they got services across all of these different areas. And maybe they're the best at it in some areas. Other areas, Google might be whooping them. Azure's got a lot of great products, and it integrates vastly better than what you'll find with some AWS stuff. So there are super huge offerings all over the board. And in the end, that means I don't get bored with AWS. There's always something new to learn there every week, exhaustingly.
Wait, I follow him on Twitter, and I feel like every 3 seconds, oh, new service offering. Oh, we got a new service offering. I'm like, calm down. I'm still learning the other ones. So a big part of our audience, well, actually probably all of our audience, we care about certifications. And I know you have a lot of them. In fact, you almost have all of them. Which AWS certifications do you have?
So I got all of the ones except for the last 2 specialty ones that they just released like a year or 2 ago. So I have the architecting certs, both pro and art associate. I have the developer cert. I have the DevOps professional. I have the systems operations certification. I also have the security specialty cert, and I'm getting ready to go and take the the big data and the networking specialty. Those are the only 2 that I don't have yet. And so across all of those, man, there's a lot of overlap between them, which I think is the hardest part that I run into with AWS, is how to pick which to go with which, because there's tons of overlap. It's like architecting, we're teaching principles, and then we're also teaching you what the services are. But then when you get into sysops, it's like, okay, now we're going to show you how to make the command line do all of that stuff for you and drive it with automation instead. So these are things where if you didn't have the other class, it's hard to step into the one after that or hard to step into the subsequent ones. So those are the certification that Amazon currently offers, and they're looking to expand even farther. They're adding like an artificial intelligence certification soon too, which will support machine learning and AI types of workloads that they have. So,
oh, that's scary.
It's growing.
I mean, how does Elon Musk feel about that?
I'll have to wait for his next tirade to find out. I don't know.
So Bart, can I just put a break on that? Where would you recommend someone new starts? And I mean, you've mentioned a few certs. Can you give us like a quick overview of the certs and what you would recommend perhaps someone starts with, and sort of a path, if there is such a thing?
Sure. So if you're interested in getting into Amazon Web Services, all of the regular IT background training applies here. If you can do your A+ and your Net+, and you have those backgrounds, then you're in a position to consider which AWS certs to possibly move into. If you're not sure what the HTTP protocol even is, or if you're not familiar with basic ISP architectures, or if you don't know what the word WAN stands for, then this might be a sign that you're not ready to move into the cloud world, and you ought to take a look at those Network Plus types of levels first and build upon that. After that, the way that Amazon does it, they're really kind of broken into a couple of key things. At the heart of all their certifications is what they call the well-architected framework. And it's just a bunch of best practices. It tells us like things like how to deal with session state, how to configure load balancers and scaling groups. All good things that, get this, apply to Azure. They apply to Google. That works in AWS. It works with OpenStack. So any of those vendors, you can use those same types of skills. It's not going to be EC2, but you're still going to have those principles there. So,
well, it's crazy because you're saying that, and like you said those terms, and I can visualize exactly what the Azure service is, because it sounds like it's like they're copying each other. It's so funny.
True. And there is a lot of keeping up with the Joneses that other vendors are doing, and I think that that's fine. Amazon did that with all the hypervisors originally too. VMware had all these features, and AWS didn't have them. So they added a bunch of stuff to get up to speed with it, dynamic modeling, the ability to move servers back and forth, all of this live migration stuff that they support. So they went and they added all of that. Now, back to David's question. Architecting is meant as your essentials one. The associate would be the one to first start with. But there are actually some beginner certs. You've got the cloud practitioner is the first one. And the cloud practitioner is kind of instant. This is the one that kind of just says, what is the cloud? How do you sell the cloud? What do businesses need to know about it? So that's a good one to start with. And then after that, the more technical one is Tech Essentials. And Tech Essentials is supposed to be the one that says, okay, this is what all of the services are that most people use. So they go over virtual machines, your compute, your network, your basic storage services, things you have to know to use almost any of the other products. So those are really the first ones you'd want to look at. After that, consider your job role. Are you going to be designing networks and solutions based on feedback from design teams? Do you want to write software that would live in a cloud environment? Do you want to be an engineer who responds to tickets in your cloud environment? Based on those different types of categories, you'd either choose to be an architect to design and implement and provide oversight, a SysOps engineer or a DevOps engineer to respond to trouble tickets and help put out fires, or you'd want to go down the developer DevOps track if you want to write software that's going to run in the cloud. So that's basically how they've built those out.
So would you say that a CCNA level knowledge is good enough to jump into the cloud, or does someone need to study more than that?
I think that if you have your CCNA and you're able to read through some basic information online about cloud services like infrastructure, platform, and software, if that makes basic sense to you, you're ready to start considering the Tech Essentials or one of the architect certs for sure. Amazon does a good job of including a lot of that. Now, if you take my CBT Nugget classes, we do things in different in our kind of a build-up model. If you take the AWS training, they will build it up on top of it as well. So they'll help kind of guide you through that process. But yeah, CCNA is a great place to start. So one of the first networking certs that I ever had too. It's a great place to start. And the thing about too, David, networking is easily one of the weakest skills that cloud practitioners have. So we see a lot of developers are out there writing apps. They're comfortable with what their code does and these functions that they're dealing with. Maybe the environment they immediately touch. But they couldn't tell you how the traffic moves, and they don't understand differential services, and they don't understand pathing or load balancing. So there is a huge gap in the skills in the networking world. So for you guys that have that networking expertise, it's going to benefit you everywhere. I think it's the most important of all the IT skills to have. Even the compute stuff isn't as important as getting the network parts right, especially if you want to move into the cloud. When I talk about cloud, there's three big technologies. The first one I always say is automation. Automation's been around a long time. Wide area networking is the other big one. And then the third one is every flavor of virtualization you can imagine. I don't mean just server VMs. I also mean the idea of like abstraction, like using drivers to hide hardware from operating systems. All of those concepts are at work in the cloud. So if you're comfortable with those models, you're in good shape. You've got that networking background. You'd be ready to go and dig into AWS and start working through it.
You know, Bart, when I first started with Azure, one thing I found shocking, and it wasn't shocking for me because I've had a lot of the server experience, but if you just had the CCNA and you knew networking, but you didn't know very much about Windows servers or even Linux, I think jumping into like something like the cloud, like AWS or Azure, might be kind of daunting because you don't understand all the facets of storage and how virtual machines exactly work. What would you recommend to get spun up on that really quickly?
Those CompTIA certs are definitely the ones that I always come back to. The A+ and the Net+, those were the very first ones that I ever got. After that, they led me on to Cisco certs and things like that. But they gave me the background that I needed, so I understand how paging works and memory contention and CPU buses, and then local storage versus network attached storage and how problems arise as we start trying to share the network with other types of traffic. So those certs, I think, are all really well positioned. And I think that's why those names are so recognizable and they're still around for all these years. So I think that those certs are the best ones to start with. And if you're finding that you want a more formal education, you can certainly go to colleges and schools to get network technology degrees that'll put you in those positions. Just be careful. Make sure that that's something that's appropriate for you. And consider, too, that they help you with positioning yourself afterwards. I think that's a big critical thing a lot of universities struggle with. So make sure that if you do choose that other education path, you add the certification piece somewhere in there, because that's the part that gives you that on-paper marketability.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't even consider a degree unless it had some kind of certification path
Totally.
built into it. Doesn't make any sense anymore.
So, Bart, sorry, just to come back to this, if someone is new, like a CCNA, and they've done, say, A+, Network Plus, stuff like that, would you recommend going straight to associate level, or is that too high? Do they need to do foundational, or does that really depend on experience?
So Amazon used to actually say you have to take Tech Essentials and then you have to do Architect after that. They don't have that hard requirement anymore, so it's up to you if you want to go and take the tests. They even removed the limit on the pro ones. You can go and sit for that right now, which I'm not sure how I feel about that. I don't know. I mean, if you're ready for it, fine, go ahead. That was the whole idea, was, buy the ticket, take the ride. But I think that, those are going to be a good starting point. The associate really has a lot of review in it. So I think if I were me, David, I would go and take a look at things like the AWS white paper, or I would take a look at the test exam, the little mock exams that they have. those questions will get you a real quick feel for how far off target you are. And then you can be like, whoa, I really don't know half of these products.
Yeah.
You need to go back to the Tech Essentials course then. So that would be really the ideal one. So real quick on that one, David, before I started at CBT Nuggets, I was what they call an AWS authorized instructor, which means I delivered their training material. At CBT Nuggets, I make my own material now. But at the previous model, we always had people take Tech Essentials first. That was the course that they wanted to take. It gave them the opportunity to learn the information, and it prepares them roughly for the cloud practitioner. So the Tech Essentials isn't an exam. It was a course that we offered that the cloud practitioner kind of goes along with. At CBT Nuggets, we have the cloud practitioner that's available, and the other certs as well. So those would be the ones you'd really want to start with if you felt like the associate architect one was a little too complex.
Yeah, and the problem is when you're moving from, say, one vendor to another, the naming can be confusing at times. So the solutions architect, that would be probably the most aligned to someone who's a networker, like a CCNA, CCNP type person. Is that right, or did I misunderstand that?
You know, the networking piece is present in almost every class. There's really only like a couple of things that we used to teach in every class. We always taught basic access management. So every course always included like user identities and permission schemes and security policy stuff because it touches every course line. So we always put those topics in. When you get into something like the networking piece, that was the other part we always talked about. We had to cover basic networking architectures because the thing is, David, if you're using a service like for example, Amazon has a product called, it's basically a managed Hadoop service called Elastic MapReduce. Yeah. It runs on EC2 instances. In order to understand how EMR does its job, you have to know about the virtual private cloud, the networks that they run in, the EC2 instances. So you can't do the big data class and talk about Hadoop on that unless you understand some of the networking pieces. So the associate and that cloud practitioner and the Tech Essentials material, they put a real big heavy focus on networking architectures. The last thing too is that you heard me mention I had there's a network specialty cert that's out there now. This one specifically is geared towards wide area connectivity. So most of that exam is about really complex border gateway protocol administration, dynamic VPN tunnels.
So it's this one right
here. Yeah,
right?
It's over there on the far left, advanced networking. Yep. Or far right. I'm sorry, my screen's backwards there. So yeah, it's over on the far right. They're under specialties. And that one is super advanced. Even in that one, we don't dig into the essential networking. We're going like, okay, we don't got enough time for that. We're going to talk big level topics. They talk about the physical pathing stuff you can do. They have a service called Direct Connect. So if you're really a networking guy and you want to get into the real big networking stuff, yeah, your path would look like practitioner, solutions architect, and then maybe onto one of the advanced networking ones. In the end, though, networking, like I said, it's in all of it. So you've really got to know the networking stuff enough to be able to have these other conversations about the AWS products. They all run in those same networks.
So you're saying that we could skip the cloud, or we could skip the professional certifications. If you're just really focused on networking, you can go straight from solutions architect to advanced networking.
Yeah, and it really kind of depends on what your position is. Remember that the architect certs are designed for people who are going to be doing problem solving and solution designing. So they're not necessarily people who are going to be sitting there sniffing packets, modeling traffic, or creating throughput models, none of that stuff. You're talking about architects who are going to Chuck and David and saying, what do you want to accomplish? What are the main requirements of your problem and your service? How can I help align my products to fix those issues? So that's the thing to remember there, Chuck, is those even the pro one, it's all about being able to help solve problems and doing that solutions architecting piece. Which I always thought was kind of funny because people show up in that class and they don't really think of it as an architecting class. They think of it as an engineering class. And I'm like, well, it's not really like that. We're talking about problem solving. We're not necessarily talking about super technical nitty gritty pieces. It's more like, if you have this problem, then these solutions will help you with it in this way. And if you have these other problems, then you can have these solutions help you, and kind of how they fit together. So, yeah, in the end, and I'll tell you what, Chuck, I am definitely suffering the curse of knowledge these days. It is really hard for me to go back to the beginner's world and think, what did I need to know to get through this? Yeah. And I don't know if you run into that at all, but man, it is tough. So hard to know you think it looks trivial and it doesn't, and then it's not, and somebody overlooks it and it becomes a bigger issue. Yeah, it can be super problematic.
So I had this question, Bart. So I know like people are thinking, okay, I want to get into AWS, I want to go to the cloud. And a lot of these guys are network engineers, at least who I'm talking to and who our audience is. Could you theoretically just jump into AWS and just be a network engineer, or would your responsibility still be scoping all the other services?
Sure. So the best way to kind of answer that, Chuck, is to consider the type of people who use AWS. What sort of companies are using them? So, for example, one of my best friends that I've been working with for years, he works for an SMS relay company. His company is responsible for relaying text messages for something like 70% of the entire North America. So he has massive infrastructure, and his company runs and uses a lot of AWS componentry along the way to help interact with it and control various aspects of it, both in the end user world, in their service delivery world, in their ticket and response world that they use. So for him, he was able to take a really big throughput provider and data provider like that and still pigeonhole a career in AWS off the side of it because they had needs that overlap with his expertise. So I think in the end, Chuck, that's the biggest, coolest part about working in the cloud is that you have all of these world's industries and businesses to choose from. And they almost all have that need to have somebody with cloud expertise and even more of that networking expertise. So in the end, Chuck, I think that if you're with the right organizations, there will be cloud networking specialty positions that they will have available. People who monitor large, wide area network deployments that work closely with the AWS support teams as well. Typically, when I find large companies like that, Verizon's an interesting one that I've done some time with here recently, and we're probably all familiar with the VZ. And those guys, they work very closely and share a lot of the same backbone infrastructure with AWS. So you've got people at Verizon helping AWS architect their backbones as well because they're sharing the same physical pathing. So I think, Chuck, yeah, there is a ton of those opportunities, and it really kind of depends on where you want to live too, because a lot of that stuff will get you down to Ashburn or into these other like hotspot areas where they really want people to physically be located. And then of course, if you look at the larger pool of customers, most of them have some sort of a networking concern. I work with Discover Card for a good while the last couple of years too, and they had a massive networking team. They were one of the first people to move into the cloud. They moved their security teams and their network operations teams into the cloud first. Those were the first people to ever build and spend any money in AWS for a massive national cardholder like Discover. So before anybody else showed up, those guys got in there and they kicked all the tires and built it all out, security and network first before anything else got deployed. It was a building block. So for them, yeah, huge opportunities. And Discover's an interesting one. You also hear people talk about Capital One. Capital One is rocking it out there in the cloud right now, and AWS is a big part of it for them. So it's not to say that we can't have sensitive workloads either. You're going to find defense and intelligence agencies using even private AWS data centers now. So it is all of those things, Chuck, and those people still definitely want networking expertise on their teams. So whether you're working for AWS or for one of their ISPs or for one of their customers, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for network folks out there.
Well, yeah, and that's what you mentioned, the security part. I know like governments, usually they're like the last section of any kind of society that to advance on technology. They're always like the last one. But yeah, we have government clouds, special Azure government data centers, special AWS government data centers, and they're moving their infrastructure to the cloud. If that's not a telltale sign that we're moving to the cloud, I don't know what is. It's pretty big deal.
And the thing too, Chuck, is like next week when I teach my intro IT class to my South African students, the first question we'll ask on day one is, what do you think the cloud is? What were your first experiences with the cloud? And of course, the primary things that come back is, I use the internet, I used a web page. These are the key themes that people think when they think cloud. And I'll tell them right off the bat, I'm like, when we read about private cloud, you'll find the National Institute of Standards and Technology doesn't say it has to be in your data center. They don't say it has to be in the internet either. It's about network accessibility. So it's not, you don't get it from the internet. That's not what we're saying. The internet is a network, but it has to be network accessible. And so the last thing I'd point here, Chuck, is that some of the biggest companies out there are building their own clouds internally. I worked with Kaiser Permanente as another gig along the side, and these guys had a massive soft layer deployment. They had IBM come in and build them seriously like a $2 billion cloud inside of their data centers. Doesn't touch anything on the internet. It's just for their internal usage. But They've got scaling, they've got dynamic resource allocation, they've got varied tiers of service levels that are supported in it, managed offerings.
What?
So people are not just, they're doing it in their own data centers now. So when we say cloud, we've really got to think it's not just internet accessible. It's about the mode of access. It's about the mechanisms that we use, not just where is it located. And I see a lot of that kind of confusion. So remember that, Chuck, these guys are designing networks that can support clouds inside of their companies so that their business units can use a cloud service without having to go to AWS or Azure or Google. So yeah, and these are big ass budgets too. These people have a lot of money to spend and have thrown a lot of money in the past historically at infrastructure problems. So they're not afraid of it. They're not afraid to invest farther and push farther as long as they get that return and they really hit those cloud checkmark points that help them become more innovative, more responsive, less burdened by previous expenses. Those are all key things with the cloud.
So I didn't know that people were building these huge private clouds with their own like soft layer kind of stuff. Do you think with the economies of scale, which is, you know, the ability to buy a bunch of bulk stuff because you have a lot of buying power, do you think enterprises will end up having to go to Amazon because they're so cheap, or do you think that they'll still be able to buy all their infrastructure cheaper?
Well, you know, Chuck, it is an open market, and it's really hard to kind of hide specialties and deals and things like that out there anymore. I mean, if it's out there to be found, people are generally made avail of that information. They know about it. So good question. People often ask me, like, can I just open up a bunch of Bitcoin mining servers on AWS? And I'm like, sure. They have GPU-enabled instances that will rock out those Bitcoin algorithms for you. The problem is Amazon knows this already, and they have modeled their price model to make sure that you pay them a considerable amount of money before you get your Bitcoins back from that output. So when we talk about it like that, Chuck, it comes down to a numbers game. You will see all of the examples of expense over and under still happening in private and in the cloud. I see people go into the cloud and get slammed with bills that were 5 times larger than they ever spent internally because they're not following the right models and they said 100% everything should go in the cloud. Okay, if you have capacity management problems, then you should consider the cloud. If you have dynamic variable workloads, you should consider the cloud. If you have fixed predictable workloads that run at the same level and have for the last 5 or 10 years, you probably should consider not using the cloud. The ROI on owning a server, especially if you can get it a little longer than its lifespan, the numbers work out. So I see this happen a lot. We got to be careful about what we do and why we do it. In the end, Chuck, I think you will find people can get a lot of good value out of on-prem resources. But we want to remember, Chuck, that the reason that they're doing it in a lot of these scenarios isn't because they wanted to replicate what AWS or Azure did. It's because they have this fixed requirement that says we have to meet this shareholder expectation or this regulatory expectation that says that we can't use hosted services. So in the end, you're paying not for more assets, but for a premium level of service that you get to have better control over. And when you put it in that light, it's not really about buying a server anymore. It's about making sure that you're getting the right solution that you need at the right quality level that you need it at. I can get food a lot of different ways. Doesn't mean that they're all the same quality level or that they meet my budget. So in the end, Chuck, people who are really paying attention and have the right savvy cloud champion mindset, they are going to find so many more purchasing and solution options now than what they had 15 years ago. And I think that is the key thing to remember, is that we can still get ourselves into a big, nasty budget problem. We can still create trouble and performance for ourselves. We can do all of those things in the cloud. We could take every single problem we have already and make it worse in the cloud. But we also have an opportunity to fix things in ways that we can't do anywhere else. That rental model, the Uber model, all of that stuff. This is what's available for us. And if we have workloads that meet those patterns, it's hands down the best way to do it. And the last thing too here, Chuck, when we were talking about, and you think about, I always kind of characterize people in their companies with these giant bags of assets on their back. And they're like, ugh, we're going to go up this giant hill for the next change. And they're like completely encumbered by the tools that used to help them solve problems just a few years before. And this is parasitic, man. This is something that lives on the side of your organization and just sucks the life right out of it. That is an opportunity to be fixed in the cloud in ways we couldn't do before. So in the end, all this adds up to what they call disruptive technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a distraction. Where do I look? I don't even know where to look.
So Bart, you moved from networking into the cloud, if I understood it right. So you had like CCNA and then you moved into the cloud. I mean, we get all this hype about, network engineers jobs are going to go away because we've got network automation, we've got the cloud. It feels like network engineers are being attacked from all sides. So what do you say to that? Is that true or is that just false? I mean, it sounds like based on that advanced networking speciality, there's still a lot of work for network guys.
Yeah, and Cisco recognizes this too, and that's why a lot of their recent branding and pitching has been around. You are a developer.
Yeah,
this is the message to their engineers. You are a software. I don't think Chuck was saying this in a video just the other day. It's like, you are a developer. Mm-hmm. It is your job to think like a developer in the interest of improving the services you're delivering. It's not like we're saying you have to do this. We're saying it makes sense to do it because you have all of these additional wins that come from it. So in the end, do you have to know development to be an engineer or a network guy? You don't have to, and there will be widgets and niches out there for you, but you will definitely have much more leverage if you have those skill sets. If you understand scripting and automation, APIs, some more things that live beyond those layer 3 and 4 problems you might typically suffer through. So if you can get up above those layers and have at least a basic knowledge of how it works, it's going to help you. And of course, the last thing for me is that it doesn't stop there. I mean, if you really want to keep going, you got to keep at it. You got to keep growing your network skills, growing your application skills, growing your people skills. All that stuff is going to help you in all of your fields, IT especially. So I think in the end, David, if you've got that, it's not just the technical part, it's the ability to go get them and go learn for yourself and really get out there and get after certs. And like Chuck was saying, when you see a thing in your organization that looks cool and new and people are like, oh, what's that? That is an opportunity, man. Step up next to that beast, figure out how it works, and becomes the one who can take care of it when everybody else leaves. That is how positions are created. And it also demonstrates something that you have as a person and as a team member that's not in your cert. Okay, that is your personal go get 'em. That is your attitude. That's your communication skills. And that last thing, Chuck, just to get on my soapbox here, I have kids.
Stay up there.
I'm sorry, man. I'm an opinionated dude. Dude, I have kids, and I know that you probably appreciate this too. As a parent, there is a finite of wisdom and time and talk that I can do to them in the hopes of trying to instill something. So the big thing for me is communication skills. I don't care what you do in the world of IT. You need to be able to talk to people. You need to be able to process technical information, and you need to be able to relay that back to other people. If you can master those skills, it doesn't matter what you do in any of the technical fields. Those things are going to help you all across the board. And that's why I think it's such a shame that here we are talking about network technology skills, but really got to have that communication stuff. If you can talk to your team, you'll become a better manager. If you can listen to your stakeholders, you'll become a better problem solver. These are all key things. And being able to talk to others and express an idea that you have or get them to buy in on it, those are key things. It feels like a sales pitch because it is. You're trying to get people to buy in on your idea. And that's a good thing. You got to get people thinking that. So I'm a big fan of communication. I always tell my kids, you got to be clear. It's about the words that you use. It's not just that you're frustrated. It's the actual words that you're saying to your sister, your peer, your friends. So I think those things make a huge difference.
I mean, you're spot on. And I made a video, I think it was last year, talking about the number one skill in IT is having that customer service or just being able to talk and communicate, being able to express your ideas. I mean, I looked at guys over my career, and you'd see one guy, and he'd be stuck in one position. He's a smart dude. Like, he just knew everything, but he could not communicate well his projects, his ideas, what was breaking, why it was breaking, why it needed to be fixed, and he just got stuck. But then the guys who knew how to communicate, who knew how to write up documents and produce all this stuff, that they went so far. It's just a stark difference.
Yeah, and you can tell it. You respond to people in meetings who have that skill. You talk to the CBT trainers, most of them have that come across, engage you type of energy. And it's a key part of being a trainer. It's a key part of being a leader too.
So I mean, Bart, you've kind of changed the conversation now from not focusing on, say, technical certs, but focusing a bit on soft skills. Is that right? Do you have sort of like recommendations of what people could read or study to get that? Because a lot of IT guys might say, well, I'm more of an hardcore technical guy rather than a communicator. So how would you, what would you recommend if there's any resources or something that people could use to get those skills or improve on those skills?
Sure. So there are a whole world of course self-improvement novels and books and resources that are available out there.
Sure.
If that stuff speaks to you, go for it. I'd encourage you to consider just public speaking. Those are some of the things that you could do about it. If you were in an environment where you could pick classes to take, definitely throw in communications, oration, public speaking, the debate team. That stuff is really important because it gives you a controlled environment to listen and to speak and to practice those skills. But you know what, David? I think, interestingly, the thing that really helped me in the last 5 or 6 years, like change how I communicate, was my kids. We practice something called conscious discipline in my household, and it's a very proactive model where you're thinking about how you're engaging them and helping them work through the problem rather than, there's a whole bunch of principles to it. But in the end, it made me and my wife really challenge the way that we talk and the words that we use and the way that we look at people and get them to focus on us. And all of that changed the way that we communicated just by learning that to help get a better relationship with our kids. I don't know if you've got kids, David, but if these guys...
Yeah, I've got kids.
Yeah, and I'm sure most parents have struggled at some point in time to understand how to react or how to process something. And so I think a lot of those skills that we picked up learning through there, it gave me not only confidence in my own communication skills, but also this kind of like prescient urge to tell others to communicate better. Because what I saw after reading... in particular, a book called How to Talk So Your Kids Will Listen and How to Listen So Your Kids Will Talk. That book, it's not just about kids. It's how to talk to people so people will listen and how to listen so people will talk to you. But those principles were wildly powerful in that book, really simple stuff. And it's something that even though it was kid oriented, it's really crucial. And the conscious discipline thing just made us be more aware of what we were doing. And the last thing, David, practice. Go out there and talk to people. And if you feel like you have that A+ personality or people talk about you like that, consider the types of positions that we've talked about, like being a trainer or being somebody who's an advocate for things or somebody who's a champion that helps people get excited about it and brings them along for the ride. That stuff's going to help you out quite a bit. But I think in the end, though, David, you really got to kind of be passionate about communication. And if you are reading and looking into it at all, then you'll find a lot of great resources online too. I'm not sure if you guys have anything you might have run along there.
Yeah, it's just nice to hear you're passionate about this. So it's nice to hear how you kind of got into this. So can you just mention again, you mentioned a specific term that you used, conscious something or discipline or something, and then the book resources again, so that if someone wants to get that, they know what to look for.
Sure. So there is a whole world of information out there around it. It's called conscious discipline. Yep. And that from there, you'll be able to jump off to a whole bunch of other subjects. And the one particular book that we really enjoyed because it had a lot of real practical examples was called How to Talk So Your Kids Will Listen and How to Listen So Your Kids Will Talk.
But you said that's not just for children. It's applicable to adults, yeah?
Yes. And those are the titles of the book. But I'm pointing out that it is very much for adults, too. So.
It was funny. When you started talking and you said you have to have kids, it was like, oh, so you're saying we must get kids now? Is that how we get good at communication?
I am a hugely passionate parent.
Yeah.
I'm all about it. I think that it's the coolest thing I ever did. After all the other things, being a parent was the most important thing. So it was in ways that I never expected it to be. So.
Yeah, definitely. It changes your life.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And it's experimental. It's like the dinosaur thing. I mean, here we are talking about this way to raise them, and it's like, all right, let's roll the dice. Let's see what happens. I did this, and I did this, and I did that, and we'll see what happens in a few years.
Yeah, I found a big thing with the communication is, what really helped me was making YouTube videos. And this might not be applicable to everyone, but I think it helps you to structure your thoughts better so you can get in front of a camera and actually start talking. Realize how much energy you're putting into it. Realize the tones in your voice and what inflections you're making and how that comes across. And then watch yourself back. Realizing how you communicate is important. And it also comes in line with, well, if you start making YouTube videos about your technology and what you're passionate about, it's also really great for marketing yourself. So it's a twofer. I think it just really would help someone's career like they wouldn't believe it. It helped mine.
Totally. Yeah, that stuff is crucial. I'm really super passionate about it. I feel like I have lots of platforms. I play music and I draw art and I do things like that. So I have lots of ways to kind of put whatever's in here out there for people. And I'm always blown away when I meet people who don't have outlets. I'm always surprised by that when they don't have something that they're passionate about. If you ask them what they're into, they're like, oh, I like a sport. I got this. I was like, I want to light a fire under this person's ass like immediately. I'm almost immediately drawn down into their like pit of like whatever they're feeling right now. And to Chuck's point, man, that is crucial. I hear a lot of instructors say too that watching other training, watching public speakers, watching yourself, that is all crucial stuff. Sports teams do that. They go out there and they watch replays. They watch the other teams play. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's crucial stuff. Nobody knows everything. You got to learn from these other folks. And I learn a lot from watching Chuck do his videos and watching Keith. And I go through and I watch him and I sponge it up. And I'm like, what worked here? What didn't work? That's how you improve yourself.
The didn't work was Keith's video, right? Because mine are perfect.
Your videos are great, man. I think that your stuff brought in there. Yeah. No, Keith is awesome, man. And he'll tell you right away. I'm so glad that he got on camera because what you were missing in his stuff is you weren't seeing his energy. He's got great energy and that camera brings that energy out. And so when you get that on there, man, it's awesome.
Yeah, what Bart's talking about, guys, all the audience, is recently at CBT Nuggets, more of the trainers are starting to do more of this, putting their face on the videos versus just a whiteboard, which adds like another dimension. You get to know the trainer more, and like people like Keith, I mean, he comes alive with just his voice, if you listen to him, but being able to see his face and his crazy little office and all his stuff he has, it's so cool to like just jump into his world. And then when you talk about someone like Bart, when his world is a yurt and he's wearing a hat, and he's got dinosaurs running around, it's insane.
Totally.
It's awesome.
So I have been drawing a lot in my videos, and I thought that was kind of a fun way to do it. But yeah, the video is just crucial, man. Having people looking at you. As soon as I added it to one of my videos, I was like, how did I ever not have this? It was like the missing piece there. I would find myself in training where we're like, oh, here's some filler. Let's just put a drawing in. And I'm like, no, I should be talking to the crowd right now. I'd be looking at people and talking to them. Instead, I'm like putting some ridiculous drawing up here that I don't really even want to have on the screen. So I feel personally liberated by it. So I'm really happy. The content comes out faster. It looks better. People connect more with it. So
Bart, you're pretty much an AWS expert. I mean, how many people in the world are actually an AWS certified instructor? I mean, you're like one of few.
Yeah.
Right?
So Amazon only delivers their training through 2 companies currently. You can take their training directly with AWS. You can do their self-paced training, and you can go to some of their like public training classes that they'll have like up in Seattle and different major metropolitan areas. And then there's companies like Global Knowledge, and that's where I got my training start, was with Global Knowledge. I took one of their classes and I was like, oh my God, this instructor, this is cool. I didn't know this was a job. And I asked him right after the class, how do I get a job like that? And he's like, dude, you could do this. You should come. You already knew this stuff in class. It was good. You should come and check it out if you really want to do it. So I ended up asking him about it. But Global Knowledge offers those training classes, and we were the only other people that offered the AWS material itself. You go out there and you'll find A Cloud Guru, you'll find Linux Academy, you'll find O'Reilly Press, you'll find all of those other people out there that have their own material, but it doesn't come directly from AWS. So for us, if you wanted to deliver that material, you had to be an AAI, an AWS authorized instructor. And at Global Knowledge, we only had about 10 of us who had that certification level. And then there was a champion status, which was what I got, because you got all the certs. And they wanted to make some comments on, like, you know, just propping us up more, because it was a lot of work and a lot of money to go through and get all those certs and do it all the time. But in the end, yeah, so I'm one of a few in the world that can train on all of their training material. And in the end, that's what that champion piece meant, was that they would let you train on anything, on any of their material. So when I came to CBT Nuggets, I was kind of like, well, what are we going to do here? I'm kind of going from being a really big high level expert on it down to CBT, and CBT doesn't have a big AWS footprint. It's like less than 3% of their viewership. So I'm personally struggling with that a little bit right now. Would love to see the numbers improve greatly, because I feel like the AWS training that we're producing is good stuff. We don't have that many people watching it yet, though. So I'd like to see.
Well, then everyone watching this, if you have a Cloud Guru or a Linux Academy, throw it away. CBT Nuggets, we just lowered our price to $59 a month. It's a no-brainer.
It is.
No-brainer.
But you know that, and I love the CBT videos. And the funny thing is, though, and I told them when I first started there, and I'm surprised they hired me, I'd never watched one before I started. Never even heard of CBT Nuggets, dude. I'm serious.
Never heard
And
of
even
Jeremy
being
Chara?
a Cisco guy, doing all that work all those years, I never once watched a CBT Nuggets video. So I was like, man, how are they ever... I felt so bad when I heard about them and then heard like they had this huge following and the Cisco community adores them. So I felt bad about that because, but it wasn't my model. I never did any video training. So it wasn't like it was their videos. It was that I just didn't watch video training. It wasn't something that I did. I would read, I was a Cybex person. I read all those Cybex books and I had the home labs. I bought routers on eBay and I'd build my stuff at home. So that was how I got started doing it. But CBT Nuggets, when I met Keith, I was instantly like, heck yeah, I would love to hang out with this guy and listen to his videos. I could definitely see where this is appealing. So it's a good model and they're definitely a cool company. So I'm happy about that part of it.
It's awesome. And guys, if you're watching, or I mean, you are watching this because you hear me talking, go watch Bart's videos on CBT Nuggets. His I almost said Azure. My Azure stuff's there too, by the way. His AWS stuff is amazing. And just go get a free trial. You get 7 days free and just try it out. But check out Bart's stuff. It's. I mean, I love your sloth. I'll see if I can add this in post. But yeah, the sloth is awesome. And the little graphics you have, like the Jurassic Park thing that you did, that was amazing. Because you'll use Adobe Illustrator, right? And like have all these things moving around.
I do a lot of like layer popping to make stuff like show up and flicker. Yeah,
it's so
you can
cool.
make the rain fall by like creating different layers that like have, different splatters on it. So one of the last things I would say, I wanted to tell you guys a funny joke about AWS. Every year before reInvent is the massive AWS party out there in Vegas that they have. It's in November, and every year before reInvent, me and the other AWS instructors, we have like a massive mailing list, and we start taking bets on like, what's the new products, what are the new releases. And I thought it was interesting that last year, in the last couple of years, there's always two camps that we fall into. You've got people on one side that are like, man, I hope that there's jumbo frame support and better networking and this and, all real infrastructure pieces, right? And then other guys are like, why? Are you guys polishing the brass on the Titanic still? And they're like, we want more serverless stuff. We want things where we don't have to deal with the network and I don't have to think about the infrastructure parts of it. So I thought that was really interesting because in the AWS world, there are absolutely those two camps. Most of the people using AWS for most of their workloads basically picked up what they had before, plopped it down in AWS and said, yeah, this is better over here. And then there's the other half of the world who didn't have all that stuff, like the startups and the companies who can build from scratch, and they don't mess with that stuff. They don't run EC2 instances. They don't run databases. It's all serverless. So it's always funny to see the two teams kind of square off come reInvent, like, we want to see more infrastructure stuff. And they're like, infrastructure's dead. And the other guys are like, we want to see more serverless stuff. And they're like, yeah, but legacy needs it. So in closing, you'll hear a lot of people talk about the newness of cloud. Just be aware that it's the term that's new. The technologies are not necessarily new, but the pricing models are, and we need people who can stand in both camps, business and tech, legacy and new school, infrastructure and serverless. Those are going to be the people who can really champion these causes. If you can do those things and bridge those gaps, you got yourself an excellent career anywhere you want to take it. Literally, I mean that. You could do it at your home or take it anywhere.
So if I'm a guy who, let's say I just got my CCNA and I want to have the best career I can possibly imagine, and I've picked AWS, what is the exact path you would design for me? What skills should I pick up to become as awesome as you are?
Okay, I've practiced one, Chuck. I've actually practiced this one before. So if I were you, what I would do is first of all decide what you're drawn to. Do you want to make things, fix things, or do you want to help people do those other things? Okay.
I want to make
money.
money.
Well, you can make money doing all of these things. So that's the good news. You got to pick which three of these things you want to make money doing. So decide if you want to fix stuff and build stuff, or if you want to be somebody who like talks to the business. Once you've figured that out, go ahead and get yourself some training, get yourself some schooling, whatever you need. And I would encourage you to consider organizations like Deloitte, Raytheon, Accenture, some of these really big consulting firms, because they have a huge customer base that touches lots of different industries. And they have a lot of on-the-job training opportunities as well. I've got a lot of friends that started out careers at Accenture and worked for them and solved problems across dozens of industries, and then went on to pick whatever they wanted. They're like, oh, I really like healthcare, or I really liked working over here in industrial manufacturing, or I like material sciences, or maybe I want to work in education. So when you work with a big consulting group like that, you can hone your cloud skills. You can experiment with new technologies. And if you get bored, Accenture and Deloitte, these guys have divisions all over the place. So you can go move into other parts of the company, and they're happy to let you do that. They don't want you to leave. They want you to develop where your interests are. And then in the end, you can choose what you want to jump off to get into next. If you think software development's better, you can switch gears. If you think software engineering or the infrastructure part's more interesting, you can move there. So in the end, after kind of incubating in one of those environments, you could pop out with literally choice du jour. So wherever you want to try to go after that, whatever industry, whatever technologies you want to work with, you can almost write your own ticket there. And salary-wise, lateral and horizontal movement, vertical escalation, all that stuff is yours to control if you build yourself up the right way. And cloud's got all those opportunities. So especially for people who are like tech omnivores like myself and like you guys, if you love that tech, man, the cloud's got it for you, and they've got lots of jobs for it.
Now, which certification could I get, and then I could feel confident where I could actually apply for a job? I mean, would it be cloud practitioner and I'm ready to go, or would it be the solutions architect?
So like if I were going to go into Accenture, I would want to have something like cloud practitioner, or CompTIA has another one called Cloud Plus, which is essentially the same exact thing. That's a good one to have. Either of those would be the ones that kind of get you into an organization like Accenture or Deloitte. And then after that, they're going to skill you into whichever area you want to go towards. And
what's the job title we would look for that?
I would look for things like solutions architecting. When you're looking at these consulting firms, almost all of them have that same type of position. It's the solutions architect. And there's often specialties, database solutions, software analytics solutions, big data solutions, networking solutions. So those companies are going to have all of their professional services divisions that can also do that work as well. So those types of certs like Cloud Plus, A+, Net+, Cloud Practitioner, those are going to be the ones that would help you get into those organizations. And then from there, they'll help you develop even farther. Now, if you're feeling comfortable, by all means, go for the associates and the pro certs when you can. But the cool thing is if once you're under their umbrella, they'll probably buy you those certs and they'll help you pay for the material to get practiced up on it as well. They're really big on that. It's in their best interest for you to be highly skilled and trained. So
now, I know, like, I'll look at the job market, and I'll look at jobs and like type in AWS or like type in AWS Solutions Architect to see what jobs are available. And it seems like all the job descriptions, they want the moon, man. Like they want you to know Python, they want you to know Linux, they want you to know all these different things, and then like on top of that, 5 years of experience. So I guess what's more of a beginner job you would look for, or would that be one of those jobs where it's just they're asking for so much, but they'll take whatever they can get?
Yeah, and this is really where if you're going to do the educational part of it, like I mentioned earlier, that placement positioning is crucial with something like that. Because if you come from a good technical program that Accenture already believes in, they're going to be more likely to take you because they have an understanding of what that program delivers to them. And what they can do with people who come out of those programs. So I'm personally a really big fan of those vo-tech types of application based training programs where you get certified and positioned, because they give you, Chuck, that opportunity to overcome some of the, I don't have the paperwork experience, but I'm coming from a cloudable organization who has a lot of expertise in it already. So they're going to kind of be able to piggyback on that. I think that those are a really good fit. Beyond that, though, Chuck, most of the big ones are like classic roles. You need to be doing some help desk stuff. Get yourself an opportunity to get in with an organization that you like what they touch and what they interact with, so that you can move wherever you need to within the company. Because I think you're right, Chuck. A lot of people, I had to start out as help desk. I could not have started out, as a cloud professional just right out of school. So I started out in a help desk to get myself some clout with my company, and then they helped me develop my school skills even farther. So any organization that can help you go farther and put you in a better position, they have the right attitude. That is a good learning attitude, and it means that that organization values not just human bodies, but actual skills. So I think if you're really looking at the right companies, they're going to help guide you into this. And if you go in there, Chuck, and say, I don't have this skill now 5 years experience, and some of what you mentioned there, those seem like intermediate to higher level positions that you're talking about there. But If you're talking about the stuff that needs the 2 years or basic understandings, look for those positions with the right companies. And then at least you're able to like bankroll that into something else. Hey, we all got to cut our teeth somewhere, right? So get in there, get yourself a chance to get some of that under your belt. And if you pick the right companies, then they'll help you go farther with it, which is why I point out those consulting firms. And the last thing I'd say, Chuck, is that I have seen a lot of students go in there right after my classes without even passing the certs. And just because they took it and they could have the conversation with them about it, they were able to get themselves placed into positions that they might not have just because they took the class and they had the dialogue that they were able to get opened on it. So that made a big difference to them.
So I know a lot of our people, and because you work for CBT Nuggets, this is relevant, but for people who don't do those placement type technical colleges or something like that, if they're just doing CBT Nuggets and they're studying your stuff, what would you recommend they do? Would it just be the help desk and try to find a company that touches it, or what would be the best decision for them?
Sure. Well, one of the first things I think whenever I talk about jobs is, of course, with IT, there are tons of opportunities if you're willing to relocate. So that would be the first thing I would kind of point out there, that if you're getting into these career positions and you feel like your local area out here in Egypt, backwoods somewhere, maybe doesn't offer a lot of local options. I don't know where exactly BFE is, but it's out there and people live there and they may not have jobs available for them. So people kind of have to consider that larger question of where do I want to work and what life am I trying to create here? Because when you ask that question, Chuck, where do they start? If you're willing to relocate, there are tons of companies who will take you on with a lot less expertise simply because they know that they can get you to move and then train you. So if you're willing to relocate, it does open up a lot of additional options. So I kind of have to weigh that against the reality of it. IT is extremely portable. So if you want to be portable, that's a good thing, but that doesn't mean that you're geographically portable. So consider that part of it as well, because a lot of those companies that are looking to get people in and groom them, they don't actually want a ton of expertise. They want blank slates and people who have good learning skills. So if you can go into those positions and show them that you're a learner and show them how you used CBT Nuggets or you used a video provider like that to go get it on your own, that says a lot in those meetings. And like we said earlier, it speaks to you as a person and as a team member. And interestingly enough, Chuck, a lot of people are saying these days, enterprise hiring practices take some funny paths now. I don't know if it's been a while since people did this, but for example, you hear people talk about like going to work for Google. The Google hiring process is extremely comedic. There's funny stuff online if you read about what they do, and they follow all sorts of weird personality exams and stuff like that. So rest assured that if you have at least basic marketability and you're approachable, those are two big things. So as long as you can get those parts, and if you can add the third piece, being able to relocate, that's like the triple threat in IT right there. If you're willing to learn, if you have good communication skills, and you're willing to relocate, boom, you can get a job almost anywhere then. And to kind of go back to that, Chuck, you're right. People who are in positions, maybe they don't have local companies that they're envisioning working for. So I think that you need to put that vision in your mind before you start trying to say, well, what's my training going to be? Because if you don't have that end result in mind, it's really hard to tailor that educational process to it. And this is, I think, the biggest problem behind go to college and figure it out. Because we see lots of people who are like, I'll figure it out once I get there. And then they don't really figure it out. So if you have an idea of what those companies look like in advance, you can look at their hiring practices and tailor yourself towards it. So the earlier you can kind of congeal where you want to end up, the better we can help you tailor those sorts of solutions and get you there.
That's excellent advice. I mean, because like that, and that's what I told people before. Like, you need to look where you are, pull up LinkedIn Jobs, pull up Indeed, and see what's in your area. And if what you want to do is not there, look somewhere else. You may need to move.
Yes,
so that's excellent advice. Have that end goal in mind, because if you're studying for your CCNA and you live in the middle of nowhere that only has like a gas station, you're not going to have very many job prospects. That's good advice.
Those fun, like remote Cisco support guys that can live out there, they didn't do that first.
Yeah.
They earned that opportunity later on. And that's where we all are now, being able to work, remotely and being able to work from home. That came after being able to show that you know who you are and what you know to people who are willing to pay you and let you go home and do that work still.
That's absolutely true. You have to earn that.
Yeah. And, when we did those bridge courses, my first course is almost nothing about cloud. It's just about picking careers. being happy with the things you're doing every day. So if you're not thinking that and you're just thinking career, I would at least I wouldn't say you're thinking the wrong things. I would at least encourage you to consider that end happiness goal there. What is it that you want to enable? Like I said at the beginning of the whole interview, IT is not the end objective for me. It is a tool that helps me accomplish other things. So hopefully that people are getting excited about that. That would be what I'd like to see come out of our chats this morning. People being like, yeah, that's cool. I can make ridiculous stuff. I can wear a hat like him. I can have a...
Where can we get this hat from?
Oh, man. So this hat came from a vendor here in Asheville. So you won't find a specific one.
Oh, of course. It's local. Yeah, I should have saw that coming.
It's local. It's local. Although what's funny is my family has a bunch of weird diets. My son's gluten-free. He's got egg allergies. My wife has got an autoimmune situation. So we have a number of different dietary requirements that we do. So we'll go to vegan restaurants and we'll order stuff because we know it's egg-free there. We're not vegan. But I'll be sitting there with my leather hat on, like ordering this like vegan hummus dish and feeling kind of guilty, slightly guilty about it. But I'm like, hey, I am patronizing here. I'm helping you out. I'm spending my money, so.
That's funny.
I usually just apologize.
That's awesome.
Sorry about the leather hat. Sorry about that.
I think that's great. I mean, Bart, what I really like about what you said is you said don't just chase like certs. Think about communication. Think about where you're going. And those are really important things to think about because I think guys just see the next cert. They don't see, the direction where they're actually going. And that's like really important to decide before you just chase certs or chase the money, if you like. You've got to decide what kind of life you want to make for yourself. And I also like what you said about relocating. I mean, sometimes you have to relocate hemispheres like some of us have done. There's opportunities elsewhere. So you need to think about what you want to get and where you want to go. So really appreciate the advice. That was brilliant.
Sure. How many of you guys have relocated? I have.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely.
Yep. For work?
I was born in a great IT environment, so I didn't have to go anywhere.
Oh.
Dallas is amazing.
Dallas is a hotbed for IT.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think I told you before, most of the people that I know from Global Knowledge, they're in Dallas.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, almost all of the trainers that I know from Global Knowledge, all of our Nortel folks, our Cisco folks, our Avaya folks, they're all down there in Dallas. I don't know what it was about it.
What can I say? We all just come together.
Yeah, it's good. Well, Chuck, I really appreciate you having me on the show this morning, buddy.
Oh, hey, Bart, this has been awesome. I mean, you are the AWS expert, so thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise. I know a lot of people are thinking about AWS. They're all thinking about, I want to become an AWS guy, and you helped us discover what that means and what kind of path we can take. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yes,
It's been
thanks so
awesome.
much.
Sure, guys.
Thanks so much.
Oh, and hey, Bart, where can they find you?
So I'm online in a couple different places. You can check out my artwork at bartcastle.com. You can find me on YouTube. You can also find me on Twitter at CloudBart. So come and check it out. And of course, you can find me at cbtnuggets.com as well.
Awesome. And we'll put all that stuff in the description. I might have it on the screen right here. But yeah, anyways, thanks for hanging out with us, and go make some more nuggets.
I will. I got to get some work done today here now. It's great meeting you too, David. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Bart, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely. But wait, I got it.
All right, talk to you later.
Baya Dunke.
There you go. There you go. You got it.
All right.
Buy a donkey.
Buy a donkey. Oh, man. All right, gentlemen. Take
Bart,
care.
all the best, hey? Thanks.
All right. See ya. All right, guys. So that was Bart Castle, AWS expert. David, that was pretty good.
It was excellent. Thanks for putting that together.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Anybody from CBT, I think, will be willing to come on. So if you guys want to see more trainers or from any company, really, we're a company agnostic. Let us know. But anyways, David, what was your takeaway? What was your big idea you took away?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I mean, one of the things that Bart said that I found interesting is that he said that you should do A+ and say Network Plus before you go for AWS. So it was interesting that he said, those sort of beginner certifications are good enough to get you started when going into AWS. And I really enjoyed the fact that he had done CCNA and a whole bunch of Cisco stuff, and now he's kind of moved into AWS, and he doesn't see that AWS is going to kill the jobs of networking people. There's a lot of networking in AWS. And sorry, I'm harping on a little bit yet, Chuck, but I mean, what I really enjoyed as well is that he sees a future specifically for network guys, and he was actually quite excited about the future of network guys. There's an opportunity for network people with the cloud. It's not as if it's going to take all our jobs away. If we adapt and we leverage our knowledge, we can actually do well in the cloud. So what do you think?
I concur with what he said about beginner certifications. And I think it's almost required to have, because like my big complaint with like the A plus or Network Plus is that they don't go deep enough, but they're very wide.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what you need with these cloud certifications, especially when you're dealing with AWS. If I had gone into learning Azure without knowing how to work servers and knowing how virtualization works and all that stuff, I'd be totally lost, because that's like 90% of the services. So yeah, that really does shine some good light on those beginner level certs that go very broad but not too deep. And I think A plus is perfect for jumping into AWS. I think you might even want to do A plus and CCNA, because CCNA will get you where you want to go with networking, but it's not going to get you where you want to go with everything the cloud offers. You might be kind of lost. So knowing how all those underlying things work, or having just a good idea of what they are, I think is essential.
I think. Sorry, I was going to say it's good that he mentioned those quiz questions, because that gives you an idea of where you are. So if you're struggling with the sort of the Amazon sample questions, then you know that you need to go back and study other stuff before coming and doing those certs.
Oh yeah, that was a good point. I think I missed that actually. So yeah, you refreshed me on that.
That's cool. I mean, I think what Bart mentioned as well, which is really important, is the fact that you mustn't just concentrate on technical certifications. You must think about soft skills. So think about communication, think about other things rather than just specific, hardcore technical certifications.
And I think it's so funny, because it kind of ties into our interview with Stuart last week, where he was talking about ownership, taking ownership of your career, of your life, and also your work. So I think like technologies like AWS, it really is taking ownership of your company's infrastructure. And in the beginning, we talked about the fear of going to the cloud. A lot of guys, I experienced the same fear of moving your infrastructure to the cloud, but it's better for a lot of situations. It's more efficient. So taking ownership and making sure you are more efficient, and that gets into the whole big thing about automation and programmability and the whole continuous development. All this stuff will make your company better, and it's your job to start looking at that, start learning how. And stop putting out fires all the time. Stop just trying to fix everything, and start designing stuff and getting your infrastructure to where it needs to be for your company to actually thrive. And I don't know, I could go on forever about that.
Yeah, I mean, coming to the ownership thing, you've got to take ownership for your career, as Stuart said. And I think what Bart mentioned, and you also had this experience, is when new technology came to the company you were in, you jumped on that. You didn't let the opportunity pass you by. So it's interesting that both of you had that experience.
Oh yeah, I thought that was really cool. I didn't know we had that same background, and I thought it was really cool that it was both phone systems. But then he had the similar experience with the cloud and jumped into that as well. I think a lot of guys out there and girls might be experiencing that same thing with the cloud right now. Your company maybe is looking into AWS. Your company may already have AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, and you could be that person. And maybe you're even on the help desk, and your system admins don't even care about it. But if you're on the help desk and you decide to learn it, you could just skyrocket. I mean, it'd be amazing.
I mean, he said that people were getting jobs just based on the fact that they had attended training. I mean, that just shows you how much cloud skills are in demand.
Well, I think I mentioned that in our first episode, that guy who emailed me, who got his AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner, got a job immediately in his company just because they know he did that.
Yeah.
I know we can't emphasize this enough, but it's all about your drive.
Yeah.
Show people that you're in it for the long haul. You want to learn. You're an asset to the company, and you can learn anything they throw at you, and they'll give it to you. That's my experience anyway.
I mean, just from my years of experience, I mean, what I can say is technologies change. Things change all the time. You've got to accept that. Don't try and just run after the money. Sort of see where you're going. And that's kind of what he said as well. Try and set some goals for yourself and realize that, in this industry, if you are prepared to learn and, you don't just hold on to the old technologies, but you're prepared to go with whatever's new, there's a lot of opportunities.
And that kind of goes into play with what he said about what companies to start at. And he mentioned value-added resellers or resellers who are managed service providers who will, service a lot of companies. So if you work for one of these companies, you'll go to a bunch of different companies and consult and help them with their environments. So the benefit there is that it's kind of like going to a buffet. You don't pick any one meal. You get to sample a bunch of different environments and see what you like. I think with a lot of people I see, especially new guys, they'll start studying for their CCNA and they start to set their goals. And 90% of first-time guys jumping into Cisco, they say, oh, I want to become a CCIE. That's my goal. That's my long-term goal. But that might not be what you want to do. That may not be the type of job you want. I mean, CCIEs, they do some very high-level stuff. Mostly, it depends on where you're at, but they might do a lot of documentation. You might hate that.
So, I mean, about CCIE, I think CCIE certifications are fantastic, and they open a lot of doors for you, and they have for me. But it's not the beginning and end-all of, even in Cisco certifications. You've got to think further than that and not limit yourself. So something I get asked a lot is, should I study CCNP or should I study Python? And I think the moral of the story is don't limit yourself. What's stopping you from doing a bit of Cisco, doing a bit of AWS, doing a bit of programming and seeing where your love is, seeing where your passion is? It doesn't help to study stuff that you hate. So if you find BGP more interesting than cloud, then try and follow that path. But a big thing to remember is that there's not always money in what you love most. So I think what Bart did, which is really cool, is he's following a whole bunch of passions like music and art and stuff like that. But he does IT, which he also enjoys, and then funds those passions through IT.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people get stuck in the trap of trying to figure out what they're passionate about, which is often just a fun little hobby that doesn't always pay the bills. But I think, that can be kind of unique for us in IT because a lot of us in IT find that we really, really enjoy IT. And for a lot of us, it is our hobby.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I don't have any hobbies. All I do is IT. when I'm not doing IT, I'm doing IT. you know what I mean?
You're driving your wife crazy talking about Amazon and Azure.
Oh, yeah. Last night, I finally did something I really like. I worked on it for 3 hours, and I went in there to tell her, and she's like, what? And I'm like, you don't care, dude. She's like, no, but you can tell me anyway. And I was like, okay. So I went ahead and told her. If you quizzed her now, she would know nothing about what I was talking about. But yeah, I think us in IT, we're lucky because if you're in IT and you're passionate about it, it's often your hobby as well.
No, I agree. And I think I just want to say this, Chuck, before we end off. I would like the audience to tell us what they think about, what we've done thus far. Have you enjoyed some of the content? Tell us what you've enjoyed, what you haven't enjoyed. Give us your feedback about, where you think this show should go. Chuck and I are still learning how to best do things, and we welcome your input about how we can make this your show rather than just our show.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Get out of my head, David.
Sorry.
This is a show for you guys. We want you to kind of shape how the future outlook is going to be.
Yeah.
Who do you want on the channel? Who do you want us to interview? Do you want us to do less interviews or more interviews? And what technologies do you want to hear about? Do you want us to do more do you want us to interview like recruiters and what recruiters look for? Just let us know, and we'll keep doing more of what you like.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a new show. Chuck and I are still learning the best way to do this. So help us make this one of the best shows in IT.
Yeah, because this is IT. This is the best show.
There you go. Thanks, Chuck. Really appreciate it, man. I'll see you next week.
All right, sounds good, David. Talk to you then.
Cheers.